Hello everyone, this is Chaff Commander Coffee, back with my next episode in my 0 AD Empire's Ascendant Introduction and Tutorial series. So last episode, we played against the very hardest AI, just to give a bit of a demonstration of what a 0 AD game actually looks like, and some of the mechanics that set it aside, really put it out there compared to other RTSs. In this episode, we will be doing an overview of the Athenians, the first civilization, well, in the list that you can pick. And I'll be going over their roster, some of their unique bonuses, and some of the play styles you can expect to see with Athens. Now, with the current alpha, there has been some changes in regards to formations that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, formations are now more or less working. I haven't really tried them. You didn't see them try, or you didn't see me try them in the last episode because I wasn't 100% sure if they worked. Because in Alpha 21 they were a little buggy. Now I can't say for certain whether they will work in an actual game yet, but the Athenians do have an ability in regards to formations, so I will be going over that and just showing them off, because that is something I forgot to do. Again, I wasn't 100% sure they were working in this current version, but if they are, fair enough. So, we'll be playing on mainland again, and we will be playing against a sandbox AI. The sandbox AI does not expand or attack, which means I'll be more or less safe to go over the Athenians here, and all of their different aspects to their team, without any incursions from the AI. So let's get right into it. I won't really be playing efficiently or expanding really at all. This is quite literally just an overview rather than an actual game. So if you're looking for gameplay, probably better turn off the video now. Anyway, let's get to it. I'll just set my villagers to do some basic jobs, just so that we have some resources coming in, because I'll need those resources to showcase some things. Right. Let's start off with Athens and their civilization bonuses. Each civilization has a couple of bonuses associated with it, and they also have a team bonus. Now, the first civilization bonus of Athens is that your ships construct 25% faster. Now, as I said in my previous couple of videos, you won't see as many naval games in the multiplayer of 0 AD as land-based games. However, that doesn't mean they don't happen, and when they do happen, that is where Athens really excels. Your ships being able to construct faster means you will be able to gain naval superiority pretty quickly. Also, Athens has some of the strongest ships in the game, and another bonus, which I'll go into later on, which further improves their ability to fight at sea, which really does make Athens quite a powerhouse when naval maps are concerned. The second bonus of Athens is the ability to construct a theatron. So I'll just select one of my units here. The theatron here, as you can see in the bottom, is the Greek theatre. It costs 500 stone and 500 metal, making it one of the most expensive buildings in the game, aside from the fortress or the wonder. However, it has a pretty good bonus. It increases your territory's influence by 20% per theatron owned. Now, you can only build one theatron, and just to go over again what territory influence is, this blue line dictates where you can build buildings. It will increase as you age up, or build buildings close to the border. The theatron increases this range by 20%, which is pretty strong, because it puts more resources under your sort of usable control. And if you are playing against other Athenian players, if you capture their theatrons, they will add to the bonus. Unfortunately, if you have more than one Athens in your team when you're playing the game, their Theatron bonuses do not stack, so far as I'm aware. Do correct me though if I'm mistaken. Yes. So if you manage to capture more Theatrons, the bonus will stack, and I believe the influence bonus, the 20% border range that you get, is cumulative with your age up border increase. So as you increase your borders via aging up, the Theatron's bonus will will provide 20% on top of that increased range. So it really is quite strong. However, it can only be constructed in the city phase, which is the third phase of the game. So you'll already be at your maximum border limit when you have the option to build one. But if you capture one before you hit age 3, in case Athens booms very quickly into age 3 and you manage to attack them and defeat them, then you can get the bonuses of that a little bit earlier. Now the team bonus of Athens is that for allies only, most of the team bonuses I believe are allies only, so this will only really affect team games as opposed to 1v1s, but all of your allies have increased metal mining rates by 10% for each passing age. Every time you age up, so you've got the first age, the village phase, then the town phase, and then the city phase. In city phase, all of your allies will get 30% faster metal mining. Now in a team game you can see why this would be pretty useful, given that metal is one of the most highly coveted resources because it allows you to train champions and get access to the most powerful upgrades. So the more metal you have, the better chance you have of, well, pushing for victory. So having an Athens player in your team, especially on naval maps, can make a huge difference. Some of the unique technologies available to Athens, now I will have to train some units just to showcase this first one, so let's get 10 hoplites training, it'll take a minute, is Ophismos. Now, this isn't actually a technology you have to research. As far as I'm aware, formations are available from the get-go. I'll be able to show it off in, well, 45 seconds. They get a special phalanx formation. So the phalanx formation provides a 30% attack bonus and 30% pierce armor bonus. Pierce armor is... So if you hover over a unit's decal here, it will tell you its stats. They currently have a pierce armor of 5, which obviously can be upgraded with technologies. And their attack can also be upgraded via technologies as well. But once in a phalanx, they get 30% to their attack and their pierce armor, if attacked from the front. So in a frontal engagement, a Athenian, or, well, I think all of the Greek teams get access to phalanx. I'm not sure. I think Sparta might get a different version of phalanx. But I'll quickly show it off now that the hoplites have finished training. So the phalanx, the formations are down here in the left. The phalanx is here. So as you can see, the units form up into a... there's only 10 of them, but obviously if you had more men, it would look more impressive. But right now, this is what the phalanx looks like. And if they are attacked from the front, so units come in from this sort of direction and hit these frontal spearmen, our men will have an increase to their attack and defense, which is pretty strong. And the pierce defense is particularly useful against ranged units. So when advancing against ranged units, phalanx really can make all the difference. So yeah, the phalanx is a pretty strong ability. It gives the Athenians a bit more staying power in land battles, so don't discount them just because they are a more naval focused team. Alright, let's just pull those men out of that formation. Right, the second unique technology for Athens is the long walls upgrade. The Athenians can build their stone walls, which are accessed in the town phase. You can see stone walls or city walls down here. They can be built outside of their zone of control. Now I believe, unless I'm mistaken, you still have to have... I'll actually just get these units to start gathering resources, because I may need to show this off. It's probably a good idea too. I believe you have to start the wall in your territory, but it can extend outside of your territory once you have the technology researched. And your walls also take 50% less time to construct. Now, this is perhaps not quite as useful in a 1v1 because you may not have time to get a proper wall going before you start coming under serious attack. But in a team game, if Athens is playing defensively whilst the rest of your allies are going on the attack, you can fortify your position you can make a pretty strong defense, especially since you can cover multiple ground and outside of your borders as well. It means you can funnel your opponents into certain locations where you want to get them in a killing zone. And yeah, like overall, building the walls faster means you can get that crucial defense up a lot sooner as well. So long walls upgrade is pretty good for Athens. It can be a bit niche, although on certain maps where there are more choke points in the game, you can cover those choke points a lot sooner because your walls can be built outside your territory. Now, once I age up, and I can attempt to build a few more buildings, let's just get these men to quickly build us a barracks, and then we'll train a couple more hoplites to go mine some stone. I'll just have this scout just run around, take a quick look at the map, and we'll get our women to just build a few houses, just so we have some population to work with. Right. Yeah. I will quickly just age up and try and show that off to you guys. The long walls upgrade should be accessible from. It may be from one of the Athenian special buildings. So we'll come to that in a bit. It may be that you actually have to buy it at the wall. So I will try that out by building a wall fairly soon. Let's get those women to finish that house, and then we'll just put them on stone for now, and then we'll have, we'll take these 7 hoplites and move them onto metal. I will need some metal to be able to showcase some of the aspects of Athens. The third unique technology, I probably should have picked a naval map to show off some of these things, but never mind, I'm sure you get the idea. The third unique technology of Athens is that your Athenian triremes, so the triremes being a type of ship, can train marines and Cretan mercenary archers. Now, this means that your ships effectively act as moving barracks, which makes you particularly strong in island-based games, but in games where there's a large central lake, and I have seen people utilize this, when you dock your ship off or get it close to the shore, you can train units from it, which can make a huge difference in actually assaulting your opponent's base from a perhaps less defended location. So yeah, Athens once again showing that it is a bit of a naval powerhouse, as it should be, historically. So yeah, those are the unique technologies and civilization bonuses for Athens. Now, we will continue to talk about Athens' roster. So, Athens' roster of units in Phase 1, it is based on phases after all. Phase 1 of Athens, you can train from your town centre. Every different civilization can train different units from its town centre. Athens can train the hoplites, which are your basic citizen spearmen. The slingers, slinger militia, which are basic citizen slingers, they cost, the sort of difference between slingers and say javelineers is that slingers cost stone to train. In fact, they mostly cost stone instead of wood, which does mean it has one advantage of allowing you to split your early resource gathering up in case you don't want to use, say you need your wood to age up, you can focus on building slingers to try to diversify what resources you're using to allow you to field more men without like slowing down your age up times. And you also get access to the cavalry skirmishers, which are javelin ranged cavalry. From your barracks, you can train the same units. There's in the village phase. In phase 2, you can train slightly more different units, but in this phase in particular, you can only train those ones. Now I will just quickly build a few more buildings so that I can age up. Do excuse me. We'll build a sentry tower as well, why not? Yep, that should be enough. I believe it's 5 village phase structures. Oh well then, let's build a Greek outpost. I'll go over the buildings in just a little bit. We'll try and get our units, our unit types available first. Alright, let's get these men to drop off their wood over here and go cut wood over there. Be a bit faster. So let's just age up. It only takes 30 seconds. Oh, maybe the town centre actually counts. Or maybe the houses do. No, I don't think houses count. Let me just count it up quickly. Oh, it won't say now that I have. Now that I have enough buildings, it won't tell me exactly what you need to age up. But I'll remember to point that out in the next video. Chaff making a mental reminder to himself. Let's see. Okay. We'll just wait for the age up to finish, and then I'll go over the rest of the units. Now, Athens does gain access to a few special kinds of units from various different buildings they have access to, and I will go over all of the buildings. Most buildings are the same for every team, but I will make a point now of saying that certain teams, the resources required to build their buildings are different. But we'll worry about that when it becomes apparent. So we're now in the next phase. We will have to build a few buildings to be able to hit phase 3. So let's get a blacksmith built, and we'll build a temple as well. There's no reason not to. And then we'll get some of our stone miners. We'll get some of the metal miners over here, since we don't really need them working on metal right now. We will build a stoa. Now the Hellenic, is that the Hellenic? Yeah, the Hellenic Royal Stoa is a special building for I think it's the Greek cultures. I can't remember if Sparta, I think Sparta does get one, I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, it's one of these special buildings for the Greek culture of teams. You can only build 2, as you can see now that I've placed 2 down. It's greyed out, I can't build any more. We don't need 2 though, we only need 1 just to show off what they do. So we'll build a Royal Stoa just to give you guys an idea of what we can get there. The other types of units we have available in Phase 2 are the Thracian Peltasts, which are... Now, here's an interesting thing. They've changed the graphical detail so that mercenary units, or units designated as mercenaries, have a green colouring on their icon, which I really like. It makes it a lot easier to identify what is considered a mercenary and what isn't. The Thracian Peltasts require 25 less food, but they require 25 metal instead. Now, as I said, metal's quite a highly coveted resource because it's used to get your, most of your blacksmith upgrades require quite a lot of metal, the cavalry upgrades in particular. And your champion units also require quite a lot of metal. Siege weapons as well can also require quite a lot of metal. What that means is you need quite a lot of metal. So it's not necessarily a good idea to spend vast quantities of your metal on mercenary units. But if you find you need some javelineers, then yeah, you may have to just resort to buying some. Again, by diversifying the resources that you're spending, you can find that you can prioritize different resource gathering roles to your citizens a bit easier. So, you know, if it's a preference of yours, then maybe it's worth spending the metal. I personally would probably hold off, but in dire straits, sometimes you just need the mercenaries. The other unit you get is the Hippeus, the Greek cavalry. These are your citizen sword cavalry. These cost metal as well, because they're sword-based units. Most sword-based units do require, in fact I think all sword-based units require metal as well to recruit. Now as far as cavalry go, I wouldn't mind spending 20 metal on cavalry because they are quite good, especially sword-based cavalry. They can be really good for running down archers and such. But given spearmen make up the bulk of most ancient armies, and you'll find most of the teams have fairly good spearmen, or at least easy access to spearmen, cavalry are a bit of a high risk, high reward. As you can see, spearmen, it says counters, they have 3 times damage versus cavalry. Now, units, the only hard counter in the game is spearmen against cavalry. I don't believe any other units have like a hard-coded bonus versus other types of units. It's simply that different variations of units generally perform better based on their loadout of weapons and things like that. But as a hard counter, cavalry will get countered by spearmen. So it is a bit of a risk-reward to invest in cavalry, and cavalry can only work on gathering hunted meat from various different wildlife that exists on the map. I'm not sure if any has... Yeah, we've got a few deer over here. Or goat, rather. There's a few goats. And your cavalry can gather food from these wild goats. Now, you can also build the livestock pen, which... Oh, where is it? There it is. The corral. This effectively... allows you to train livestock animals, which your cavalry can then hunt from. At least that's what it was in Alpha 21. It may have changed, so I'll quickly build a corral just to make sure that actually is still a mechanic. Right. Do we have enough buildings to get to the next age? No, we don't. Right. In that case, what we'll do is we'll upgrade this sentry tower into a defense tower, and that should allow us to get to the next stage, which saves us a bunch of build time, which is good. Right, so in the corral, yeah, we can train sheep, and your cavalry will be able to gather food from the sheep. There is a bit of a strategy associated with livestock pens. That's a bit more apparent on cavalry-heavy teams, which I will show off. Or there's also another team that's not necessarily cavalry-heavy, but they make very good use of it. I'll get to that when we do their overviews. But mostly livestock become a bit of a population save, so you can convert your women farmers. You can sort of like delete them and then train like half as many cavalry to gather food from livestock, and it's just as efficient. So it's a bit of a way to save population in the late game, but that's only really late game, so it's not something to concern ourselves with right now. The other place we can train units is the stoa here. Now the stoa allows us to gain access to very expensive mercenaries. As you can see, these ones cost 150 metal. The Thracian Black Cloaks are the only ones available in this age. I'll just train one of them just to show them off. And then in the next age, which we will be advancing to right now, since the tower just finished, they are the Heavy Skirmishers. Now, Athens, or I believe all the Greek city-states, they do get different units based on which team it is, but the mercenaries you train from the stoa, they are very expensive, but they are champion units that are available one age earlier. So there's some interesting strategies involving Athens and mercenaries, or the other Greek city-states and mercenaries. You can use them as a counter-rush kind of unit, or to bolster your early timed rushes on your opponent. Because you'll have access to champions and they won't. And I can tell you for now, if we were to compare an unupgraded hoplite, let's just take a hoplite. Let's bring a hoplite over here. They have a close quarter attack of 3 hack and 2.5 pierce damage every 1 second. So they have a DPS of 5.5. They have an armor value of 5 hack and 5 pierce, which basically gives them a 41% damage reduction to both hack and pierce damage. The Thracian Black Cloak has 11 hack damage, so he has twice the damage, and he attacks at a rate of 0.75 seconds. So, the Thracian Black Cloak has pretty much more than double the damage of a standard citizen hoplite. They also have 7 hack armor and 7 pierce armor, which gives them 52% damage resistance. As you can see, the citizen hoplite also has a capture attack, so when you capture buildings, as I showcased in my demonstration, they have a capture attack of 2 every 1 second. The Thracian Black Cloak, or the mercenaries you train from the Stoa, I'll just get one of the peltasts out as well, they have a capture attack of 5, so they also capture more than twice as fast. So as you can see, the mercenary champions are certainly nothing to sniff up at, because they are pretty formidable units, even for their absolutely extortionate costs. But as I said, if you need the mercenaries, they can really make a big difference in combat. Now what I will have to quickly do is show off the rest of the buildings for the Greeks. So, let us build a council chamber. We'll have to build one of those. We'll have to build a gymnasium, and we're going to need some more stone, so I'll quickly just build a marketplace so we can show that off as well. Right, so yeah, I've just also recruited one of the heavy skirmishers. What I will do as well is just recruit one of the Thracian peltasts and bring them over here, and one of the slingers, so we can just compare those. Just to show off the kind of differences between the 2 different classes of units, since that is the point of this video, or part of the point of this video. And after I've gone over the unit rosters, I'll go over the buildings available to Athens. As I said, most teams have very similar buildings, however there are slight differences in terms of resource costs and the kind of... Some teams do have unique buildings, or culturally unique buildings. Anyway, let's compare the heavy skirmisher to the standard citizen skirmisher, or the mercenary skirmisher. The mercenary skirmisher has or the citizen mercenary skirmisher has 16 pierce ranged attack at a range of 24 and a rate of 1.25 or attacks per second. They have an armor of 1 and a pierce armor of 1, giving them only 10% damage reduction. The heavy skirmisher has 26 pierce damage at a range of 28 and a fire rate of 1 per second. So they attack faster, they have a longer range, and they have 10 more damage. They also have 5 hack armor and 5 pierce armor, which is the same amount of armor as a citizen hoplite, making the heavy skirmishers particularly strong frontline ranged units. Now if we compare that to the slinger has a 9.5 pierce damage, 1 crush damage, a range of 48 at a rate of 1 attack per second. So they have less than half the damage of the skirmisher, but they do have almost twice the range. However, again, their armor values are very low. They have the same armor values as the Thracian peltasts. So, whilst the slinger and the peltast are a lot cheaper, the heavy skirmishers they output almost twice as much damage in both cases, and their range is slightly better than their citizen soldier counterpart, and their armor is a lot heftier as well. So, as I said, the heavy skirmisher will output a lot more damage at range than your citizen counterparts. This makes them particularly good at countering your opponent's champion units. As you can see, this is one thing I probably should have mentioned. The HP values of the 2 different units, you can see the Citizen Hoplite has 132 hit points, compared to the Thracian Black Cloak at 200. The same goes for the ranged units, with the citizens at about 66 each, and the heavy skirmisher at almost double that, at 120. So as far as ranged units go, the mercenary heavy skirmisher is absolutely astonishing. He can really, if you get enough of these guys, they can absolutely tear through champion units with very little issue. And they actually can survive quite a lot of ranged fire as well. So now we've completed those buildings, where have my workers gone? Let's just put all these guys to deposit their resources and see if we can't build ourselves a fortress. We can. Yeah. Let's get a fortress built, just so we can showcase some of the things, some of the units available from there. Okay, so we have the Greek Council Chamber. This is the building where you will be... Oh, let's just build another storehouse, get those guys cutting some more wood. The Greek Council Chamber is where you will train your heroes. Heroes are effectively a one-time unit. You can only have one hero, and you can only choose between one of the heroes. When they die, you can retrain them, but the cost to retrain them increases the more times they die. So really, you do want to keep them quite safe. So we have 3 heroes for Athens. Every single team or every single civilization has 3 different heroes. For Athens, we have Themistocles, who is a sword infantry. He has inspired defense. I believe all heroes in the game, regardless of which civilization you're playing, have this ability of inspired defense, which is when they are garrisoned in a structure or a siege engine, the hero gives it a bonus of +2 capture point recovery rate. So it's a lot harder to capture buildings that a hero is garrisoned in. Now, you don't really want your hero to be sitting around garrisoned in a building, unless you're under heavy attack and you think your opponent's going to try capture the building. If your opponent lacks siege weapons to knock the building down, they will find it incredibly difficult to capture, even if just the hero is garrisoned inside of it. If the hero is garrisoned in it with some extra units on top of that, it will become nigh impossible without damaging the building first. Themistocles has his unique bonuses of, when garrisoned in a ship, the ship is 50% faster and trains batches of units faster. Now, with the unique technology of Athens, the Iphicratian reforms, where your triremes can train marines and the Cretan mercenary archers, Themistocles, if he's garrisoned inside one of those, will mean that your units train, and they do train a lot faster. It doesn't say exactly how fast they train, but it is quite spectacular how quickly you can batch train units with Themistocles in the ship. And the ship is also quicker. So he's, again, a very naval-focused unit. His second ability is Naval Architect, which he reduces the build time by 20% and the metal cost by 50% for all ships, every single ship that you build during his lifetime, so whilst he's trained and on the field. So Themistocles is really your go-to hero in a naval map. The other heroes we have access to are Pericles, who is a close-quarter spear infantry. Pericles has his first ability is a 15% build and repair rate for all your workers within 60 meters of him. Now, this is a particularly strong defensive ability, as you can quickly take or garrison units inside and out of buildings to stop your opponent from smashing them down. It can also be very useful in a wonder game. So as I showed in my game options overview video, there are wonder games available to play, and Pericles is pretty strong at those games, because he can help you build your wonder 15% faster, which can make a big difference if both of you, or both players, or both teams have very similar times in when they start their wonder. Pericles will make sure your timer starts first, because you'll get your wonder finished first. He can also be very useful on the attack, because you can build fortresses, these large 1,000 stone cost buildings, which are very useful. You can garrison units inside of them, and then they shoot arrows out. They're very strong defensive buildings. He can help you build them faster on the attack as well. That also applies to building forward town centres. So Pericles is pretty good for that alone. His second ability is Temples to Athena, where he reduces the stone cost and increases the garrison heal rate of all your temples. So the temple here has a aura, as you can see, and that aura heals all units inside of it. If you garrison units inside of the temple, they will heal faster. Pericles further increases the healing rate for units garrisoned in temples, so you can get your army back into the field a lot quicker if you have Pericles as a leader. He also makes them 25% cheaper, so if I just take these units out of this fort, you can see temples cost 300 stone to build. Now he makes those 25% cheaper, meaning you can get more temples. Temples can only garrison 20 units, so if you want to garrison, say, 60 or 80 units, you will need multiple temples. Pericles will save you quite a lot of stone in the long run in a game, with that stone cost reduction on temples, allowing you to build more of these fortresses. So Pericles really is quite a good hero for booming your defences up. Now with the Athens special ability of long walls, where you can build your walls outside of your zone of control, as you can see, here's the upgrade for long walls right there. In fact, if I just trade a few pieces of metal, we'll be able to buy that upgrade and just show it off. Pericles walking around with a group of units tagged to build your walls will help those walls build even faster. Which means you can really get a solid multi-layered defense up very, very swiftly. So Pericles, very strong defensive hero. Our final hero is Iphicrates. Now Iphicrates has formation reforms. All soldiers in his formation, this is key to note, if you have a hero selected with, say, so if I were to, I need a bit more food. Let's trade some wood for food. Let's just build Iphicrates after that research is done. So if Iphicrates is in a formation, that formation gains 15% more speed and 3+ armor. Now that is a global bonus. That is a 3+ armor to both pierce, hack, and crush defense. So it's not just like the phalanx bonus of 30% pierce armor, it applies to all armor, which is really strong. His other upgrade is all your javelin infantry, this is global, have 15% more speed. Now this is a bit more of a strange, not a strange ability, but if we consider that both the javelineers from the barracks are mercenary units that cost metal, and your heavy skirmishers over here also cost a vast amount of metal, if you are going to use Iphicrates, he makes for very strong skirmishing forces, especially if he's attached to a regiment. If Iphicrates is in a heavy skirmisher formation, he is going to absolutely boost them to be quite incredible, really. So let's just show this off. We'll get these hoplites to go into a phalanx. So as you can see here, they're in a phalanx. They're getting a bit stuck on Iphicrates there. This is sort of the move speed you can expect the phalanx to move at. And yeah, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But it's not particularly amazing. So if we break them out of formation, we can just take Iphicrates with us as well, and then put them in a phalanx. Yep, let's let them form up on Iphicrates. As you can see, it's a little bit faster. It's nothing spectacular, but it is a speed. Oh, is Iphicrates having difficulty joining in the formation there? He might be. Let's put them in battle line. Yeah. Yeah, he was having a few, as I said in my previous videos, formations used to be a bit buggy in Alpha 21. They're not quite fixed yet, but yeah, he was having a few difficulties getting inside the phalanx, but inside of a battle line formation, he's perfectly fine. And as you can see, they move a little bit quicker, but the main bonus is that he does give more armor to those units as well. And because we have him trained, you can see the skirmisher here, they're pretty damn quick. The heavy skirmisher. Now, if you had a formation of these guys, you can imagine they can pelt across the battlefield pretty quickly and really get into your opponent's ranks and tear them apart. So, if Socrates has a playstyle more tending towards skirmish hit and run tactics, which is a little bit different for the Athenians, he's certainly one of the stronger heroes to take in a land-based game, simply because his bonuses apply there more often. Now, one thing I will just quickly try out is building the Athenian long walls. Aha! You can build them outside of your right. So, scrap what I said earlier. Athenian long walls can be built and started outside of your zone of control. So, as you can see here, my zone of control is right here. And the Athenian long walls can be built anywhere on the map. I could build these walls over here in front of my opponent, and I would be allowed to do that. So yeah, one of the advantages of Athenian long walls, and I'll just they'll build that really quickly. We do get a 50% build cost reduction or in speed for building these walls. So you can see even just a few units are erecting this wall at quite a staggering pace. Yeah. That wall will be complete. Like this is literally 10 hoplites. This is a tiny force of hoplites building this wall. Just move this guy outside and build that corner up. It really doesn't take them very long at all, which is pretty good. That's just 10. If you got 20 or 30, those walls would be up in seconds, and you really could get that defense rolling. And with Pericles, you can just imagine. They would get finished in absolutely no time at all. Now, because they are outside of our zone of control, they are slowly losing loyalty. However, you can garrison walls. At least you can garrison the wall towers. So if we put a hoplite inside this wall tower, you can see its loyalty is now increasing. So we won't lose control of this tower. This stone wall, however, we will lose control over, and we can't garrison units inside of it. But that's fine, because if we lose the loyalty of the middle walls, it's not going to make a huge difference. I don't think I can. Let me just try something. We'll just upgrade this to a gatehouse. Won't take very long. I'm not sure I can garrison units inside gatehouses. I'm fairly sure I can't, but we'll give it a bash anyway. Nope, we can't. Can we? No. Cannot. I can't garrison units inside the gatehouse, but that's fine. Yeah. So if you want to build defenses outside of your lands, be aware that the main walls will eventually degrade all of their loyalties, so you won't control them anymore. However, you can put units in the towers and you will retain control of the towers, and since they're the places where you can garrison units inside of them, they will shoot arrows out. They will act as sort of like mini arrow towers, which is pretty good. Right, onto the fortress, where Athens will train its siege weapons. So you have access to two different kinds of siege weapons. You have the bolt shooter and the siege catapult. So no battering rams for Athens, which is one of my favourite siege weapons to use, is the battering ram. But we'll build a bolt thrower and a siege catapult, just so you can have a look at those. And the final building where we can train our units is the gymnasium. Now the gymnasium is a Greek culture building. Other teams can build their champion units from fortresses. There's a couple of different variations to where you get your champion units from. It does vary from team to team, but for Athens you get them from the gymnasium. So we have the option between the city guard, which requires 75 metal, 100 wood and 125 food. They are champion spearmen, so keeping on with the Greek theme, we have quite a lot of spear units. We also have access to the Scythian archer, which is a champion archer unit. So the fact that we lack citizen soldier archers and mercenary archers can be made up for with our champion archers, and the mercenary Cretan archers you get from the Athenian triremes. But if you don't have any water on your map, you still get access to archers via your gymnasium, which is pretty good. So let's quickly just go over the siege weapons. So as you can see, these siege weapons, like buildings, also have loyalty. They can be captured. You can capture your opponent's siege weapons, which is a really cool mechanic. I really like that. But as you can see, they're packed up right now and they're being dragged around by some horses. You have to unpack the siege weapon, which does take a little bit of time to be able to use it, which is not really a problem. So we'll just unpack these siege weapons. Here is the siege catapult, which will fire rocks at your opponent's buildings. So you will need to position them quite carefully. And then you have the oxybeles, the bolt shooter, which is basically a ballista. So this is more of an anti-infantry siege weapon, or an anti-unit siege weapon. It has 150 pierce damage and 25 crush damage. So it will kill citizen soldiers more or less in one hit. At least it will kill archers and such in one hit. Hoplites it may not quite down in one hit, but pretty close. It has a range of 8 to 80 meters. So far, it's the longest range unit we've seen. I can't remember if the Scythian archers... The Scythian archers have a range of 76, so the ballista can outshoot champion archers, which is great. And the siege catapult has a ranged attack of 10 pierce and 100 crush damage. It has a range of 12 to 80, minus 11 meters. I believe that's because of the elevation. Elevation does play a part in the range of buildings, so if I can find a location to quickly showcase that. We'll build the defense tower. So as you can see, if I was to build a defense tower over here, 14 meters. If I was to build it over by this hill, it's not a... I can't build on top of the hill because we can't get up there. But if I build it on this slight incline here, we get 15 meters. Now, on certain maps, terrain will be more elevated in certain locations. You will find actual hills that strategically very good to control, because your ranged units and your towers will have higher range on them. So yeah, and I believe the siege catapult is suffering from not being on a hill, but it's still pretty long range. It also has splash damage of 15 pierce and 35 crush. So you can use the catapults to attack large formations of units. However, generally speaking, these are your anti-building siege weapons for the Athenians. Right. So our final two units to look at are the City Guard and the Scythian Archer. I'll just bring them over here so we can have a little comparison of those units with the rest of our champions and mercenaries. So let's take a look at the Scythian Archer. This is the only archer, aside from the mercenary Cretans, which you can train as Athens. They have 120 hit points, the same as the heavy skirmisher. They have 5 hack armor, 5 pierce armor, same as the heavy skirmisher. But they have 6.5 pierce ranged attack, which is the lowest damage we have seen so far of all the ranged units. However, they have a range of 76 meters and fire every 0.5 seconds, which means they have a DPS of 13. So every second they will fire 2 arrows, thus they deal 13 points of damage, which makes them higher damage than the slinger. Is that? No, it's almost twice the range. And they have comparable damage to the Javelineer with basically triple the range. So do not underestimate the Scythian archers. They're pretty damn good. Now, if you really want to out-damage your opponent, you probably want to get the heavy skirmishers. These guys are particularly effective at taking out champions, as I said beforehand. However, if you want to outrange your opponent's ranged units, for example, if you're fighting the Malians or the Persians, who have particularly easy access to archers and particularly long-range archers, Athens can utilize the Scythian archers to really give them an advantage in ranged versus ranged duels, or, well, shootouts, if you would. So that's the Scythian archer. Now over here we have the city guard. They have 6 hack damage and 5 pierce damage at an attack rate of 0.9. So compared to the citizen hoplite, they have pretty much twice the damage. Well, exactly twice the damage. They have a armor rating of 8 hack and 8 pierce. Now this is the same, it's slightly higher, it's 1 point higher than the Thracian Black Cloak Swordsman. And their actual damage output is the same as well. So you might be thinking to yourself, why would I get the Thracian Swordsman over the City Guard? Well, again, the Thracian Swordsmen are available at Age 2, whereas the City Guard are only available on Age or Phase 3. So, however, one of the main advantages of the City Guard is because they are a spear unit, they can form a phalanx. So as we went over earlier with the unique technologies of Athens, your phalanx formation provides 30% more attack and 30% more pierce armor when attacked from the front. If you manage to get enough city guard together, you can create quite a powerful block phalanx and simply force your way through your opponent's ranks. The Thracian Black Cloaks, because of the time that they're available, are more of a reactive unit, whereas the City Guard, the Epilectos, you really want to be trying to mass up in the late game to build up that really powerful phalanx formation that your opponent simply doesn't have the firepower to deal with. So, that's an overview of the Greek soldiers, their heroes, and now, one last thing to go over is the Greek buildings. So, let's just go over the Greek buildings. There's a few things to consider. We'll start from the top. We have, we have your house, basically. Now, it is important to go over the houses because they are different between certain teams. The Greek house cost 150 wood. It can support 10 people and has a garrison limit of 6. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why does the house have a garrison limit? Well, I'll show you right now. If I was to try and garrison these hoplites into a house, they can't do it. I'm not able to garrison these hoplites. However, I am able to garrison my women villagers, so I can put them inside the house. Now, where this is useful is if you get raided by a few cavalry or some such. When you press the town alert button, all of your current workers will try to find the nearest location that they can garrison, whether that's a temple, a fortress, or, in the case of the women, the houses. So you want to really, for example, you can also increase the alert to a second level, which tries to call in more units from further afield to try to protect them. But yeah, if you want to protect your women, for example, say you had a farmstead, I'm sure I built one over here. If you had a farmstead over here, which is further away from your town centre, and you had some fields like built up around it, like so, and you got attacked, if you had built some houses by these fields, then the women have an easy location to garrison inside of them. Now, because a house can support 6 garrison limit and a field can be worked by 5 women, you generally want to build 1 house per field in your outlying fields. Now, if you have fields surrounding your town centre, this is less of an issue. However, your town centre can be garrisoned by men as well. As you can see, I can garrison this hoplite inside the town centre. And it can only support 20 men. You can only garrison 20 units inside the town centre. So you don't really... it's not that you shouldn't have more than 4 farms around your town centre. It's that you should keep in mind, if you do have more than 4 farms around your town centre, you should probably have some houses built close by as well, just to make sure all of your villagers have a location to garrison if the alarm is called. Okay, so on to the next building. You have your basic storehouse. This is used to store wood, metal and stone. It also has 4 different upgrade trees. You have the upgrade for wood, the upgrade for stone, metal, and then the 4th upgrade, which increases the capacity of resources that your workers can carry. So yeah, those are the 4 upgrades available from the storehouse. These are available to all teams. I think some teams have unique upgrades. I'm not sure if there's any in the storehouse, but there definitely are some in the farmstead. The houses also have a few upgrades. I probably should remember to go over those whilst we're doing this video. We have the loom, which is a favourite of Age of Empires players. It only boosts your female citizens though, but it does give them 50% more health. So if we quickly take a look at one of our female citizens, wherever they are, there's some hiding over here. Let's grab one of those. You can see they only have 25 hit points, which is really nothing, and they have practically no armor as well. So they're very easy to kill. The loom just makes it so they need to take a few more hits to die, and it's only 150 food, so it's a very cheap upgrade, and it might be worth doing. Well, it's definitely worth doing in the late game when you have all of that food spare. In the early game though, it's really, if you think you're going to get rushed by your enemy, then the loom can make a big difference, but it's a decision you have to make depending on who you're up against. Certain teams that have very obviously powerful early game rushes, it can be a lot more advantageous to get this upgrade, but in general you can normally skip it, I find. You also have the home garden upgrade, which means all of your houses get a 20% population cap bonus. So your 10 population capacity houses now house 12 people. When you have a population cap of 250, this means with the home gardens upgrade, you only need to build 20 houses to reach your 250 pop cap, because your city centre also provides population cap. I believe it gives 20 population cap your city centre, whereas if you don't have the upgrade, you will need to build 23 houses instead of 19, which saves you a small amount of wood. It doesn't save you very much, but it does save you some. It also saves you building time, obviously, because you don't have to build quite so many houses. Personally, I prefer to just build the extra houses. Huh. Well, I guess the AI did decide to expand. Well, there you go, there's sandbox AI for you. But yeah, the home garden upgrade, generally prefer to ignore it until the late game when I'm absolutely flooded in resources. Then I will get it, only because if one of my enemies does destroy some of my houses and I have extra houses effectively built already, it won't affect my population cap. So it's actually a little bit of a tip there. I highly recommend, if you're playing if you get into the late game in a 1v1 or in a team game, get a couple of your villagers to just build a few extra houses, even if you're at pop cap. The reason why is because if you do get attacked or raided and your opponent manages to knock down 4 or 5 of your houses, if you have 10 spare built up in the background, then it will not affect your capacity to field new units. So there you go. If you've got the resources, it's definitely worth doing. If you don't, obviously don't spend the wood that you could use to get units. But yeah, there's plenty of wood in most maps. In a low wood map, you could probably avoid doing that. But in a map like this, where the wood is generally pretty good, it's not a bad idea to do that. The third upgrade is Fertility Festival. Now, just to point out, I will not go over all these upgrades in all of my overview videos, simply because this is the first one. I may as well do it. These are available to all nations, so all civilizations should get these 3 upgrades. All civilizations will get the 4 storehouse upgrades, so just to point that out. The Fertility Festival upgrade allows you to train women, right here, from your houses. Now this is a pretty powerful ability if you need to boom your economy up after being attacked. Because you can just double click, select all of your houses currently in your screen. So if I double click over here, I have 7 houses. And I can just build 7 women. And I can start pushing women out of all of the houses to recuperate my workforce. Do keep in mind though, because the women cannot fight, you are leveraging part of your population that cannot defend your base. Whereas training citizen soldiers, they can fight and gather resources. So just something to note there. Right, the next building on our list, there's quite a few to go through, though most of them won't take quite so long, is the farmstead. I already built one of these down here. This is your food drop-off point. It has 2 different upgrades. It has a basket upgrade. Now this is a one-time upgrade that you can get, which increases your foraging rate for fruit, such as fruit berries over here, these berry bushes. There are other kinds of forageable resources, such as fruit trees. You can find apple trees or fig trees in certain maps. And that increases your foraging rate by 50%, which is pretty significant for just 100 wood. This is generally an upgrade people prefer to get right at the start of the game, just to make sure their economy gets kick-started nice and quickly. In maps with very high forage, it can be particularly important to get. The other upgrade is your plow upgrades, which increase your farming rate. Now farming is actually pretty slow to get food from, but once you upgrade it, it does boost its efficiency. So it's a good idea to remember to get your farming upgrades pretty early on. The next building we have is your field, which can hold a maximum of 5 workers. After that we have the corral. Now I went over the corral earlier. You can train sheep from it. If I can find any of the sheep that have been wandering around. Here we go. There's one hiding behind this forest here. There's a sheep right there. Can you see that? That sheep. So it costs 50 food to train sheep. Certain teams have goats. They're exactly the same, and pigs and things like that. Or more or less the same. I think some of them cost more food to train, but then give more food. So it's really just a case of efficiency, really. But you can train your sheep, which appear as fauna, as just random animals on the map. And you can butcher them to get more food. This is actually the fastest way of gathering food in the game. However, it does require quite a lot of setup. And it also gives your cavalry, your citizen cavalry, a job, because otherwise your citizen cavalry can't do anything other than gather food from livestock and wild animals. The 2 upgrades we get is your stock breeding, which makes the first upgrade reduces the time it takes to breed them, and the next upgrade, I believe, increases your gathering rate from those animals. The other upgrade here is cavalry breeding. Now this is quite an important one because a lot of people overlook it, especially in long 1v1 or team games. You should always build at least 1 corral, if not at the start of the game, at least midway through or towards the end of the game, to get this 10% cavalry speed boost. It's pretty damn important. If your cavalry are faster than your opponents, you will be able to maneuver around the map faster. You can flank their infantry, raid their base a lot more efficiently, and also catch opponents' cavalry that try to raid you or try to escape your units. So the cavalry breeding upgrade is pretty important. The next building we have is the outpost. As you can see, I built one of the outposts over here earlier. The outpost, I believe, is one of the only buildings you can build outside of your own territory. As you can see, I can build the outpost anywhere. If you build it outside of your territory, again, it will slowly convert to neutral, and then you will lose the line of sight from that outpost. But yeah, it's effectively used as a scouting building. So if I was to build a outpost over here, you'll be able to see some sort of the line of sight that it provides. Let's just deselect those guys and have them run over there and build that. Let's get this this woman to go over there and build it as well. So yeah, eventually it will convert to Gaia, but they can be useful to scout your borders. If you build a few of these around your base early on in the game, they're not terrible, but I wouldn't recommend rushing outposts. 80 wood is not that expensive, so they're not that pricey really when you think about it. But it is a resource drain that you could perhaps do without. There is one thing I do want to point out with outposts though, that a lot of people do seem to forget. If I was to build an outpost out in the middle here, in the middle of nowhere, you will find that it starts to convert to Gaia. However, the outpost, rather sneakily, has a garrison limit of 1. You can put a unit inside the garrison, and that way, it will stop converting. Yeah, it's pretty nifty, huh? So even though they will, or their general mechanic is that they will eventually convert to Gaia, if you garrison a unit inside of them, not only will that unit fire arrows out, they do have a minimum range, so as soon as units get in melee with this tower, there's not much you can do about it. But yeah, you can, so as you can see, this tower is now becoming less loyal. It does take quite a long time, and there's an upgrade here, which reduces the decay rate even further for towers in neutral territory. But if I was to put this slinger inside of it, you can see the loyalty goes back up to full and stops dropping. So that's it's one of the nifty things about outposts. They have their niche uses. The other upgrade is a 50% vision range for the outpost. So you can use them to bust the fog of war pretty effectively. Again, they're a bit more niche, but if you can use them correctly, they can keep your flanks secure from raids and things like that, because you'll be aware of those incoming units trying to sneak around you. Especially if you want to be extra sneaky, you can build an outpost if I can find a spot for it. So you can build them, for example, in the trees here. So I could build an outpost there. If I go over to this tree line, say over here, can I build an or I can be sneaky and build an outpost like there. Or even if I go... certain maps you can get really nifty, like here. So I could build an outpost right there. And put a unit inside of it. And my opponent would probably miss that for the entire game. They would have no idea that. It will show up on the minimap, but because it's clustered around trees, it is a bit harder to spot. So you can be sneaky with the outposts. It's something to keep in mind. But it's certainly not something you should hinge your entire strategy or play style around. But there is some funky things you can do with them. Okay, on to the next building. We have our palisades. This is your village age wall, if you would. They're not very durable. They're very quick to build though. As you can see, I've got 2 units building this palisade, and there it is. It's already constructed, including the main section of the wall. Very, very easy to build. So that's just my units moving through here. Game, are you lying to me? I'm watching the AI expand. I thought Sandbox didn't expand. Well, there you go. The Sandbox AI is just really, really slow. But there you go. It does expand. Anyway, back to the palisade. Very cheap. You can get the gatehouse upgrade just as fast as you build them. So if you need a very early defense, palisades are not bad. They're not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. You can't garrison units inside them, so they're not great. But they can do the trick in a pinch. So not too bad. The next building we have is the sentry tower. This is a very basic guard tower. It only costs wood to build, and you can garrison 3 units inside of it. It's not amazing as far as defensive buildings go. As you can see, it has very, very low hit points, lower than the palisade in fact. It's very easy to destroy, and it's also very easy to capture as well if it's not garrisoned. So make sure your opponent, if you build sentry towers, make sure your opponent doesn't leverage these against you by capturing them early on with a sneaky raiding party and then garrisoning them with their own units, which can be a real problem. The sentry tower has one upgrade, the sentry upgrade. This can also be bought at an actual guard tower. It's the same upgrade, so if you buy the upgrade here, it will apply to your main guard towers as well. And you can also upgrade your sentry tower into a defense tower, which costs 50 wood and 100 stone. So overall, it costs 150 wood and 100 stone, which is 50 wood more expensive than building an actual defense tower. So you might be thinking to yourself, why would I do this? Well, here's another little tip there for you. You can build, for example, 5 sentry towers in phase, or 4 sentry towers, 4 or 5 sentry towers in phase 1, right? When you hit phase 2, if you have the resources, you can then upgrade all of those sentry towers into defense towers. And once they're finished upgrading, they count as the buildings you need to advance to phase 3. This allows you to get a very, very well-timed phase 3 and a strong defensive perimeter around your base. So if you do this correctly, this allows you to boom into phase 3 pretty fast, and also defend yourself whilst you're doing that. So, a little nifty trick there for you. Build multiple sentry towers in phase 1, and by phase 2, upgrade them and get to an early phase 3. It is a little bit more expensive on your wood, but overall, it's pretty efficient. It's a lot faster to upgrade the towers than it is to build more buildings, like building a blacksmith, a temple, for example, the stoa and the gymnasium as well. It's a lot faster to just build the sentry towers and upgrade them. Our next building in the list, I'll go over the upgrades for towers when we get to our defense towers, because they are the same. The next building is the dock. Now, I can't show it off because we're not in a naval map, which was a bit of a mistake by me, but never mind. The dock is incredibly interesting. It's a very, very interesting building. It gives you a population bonus, so it counts as 5 population cap. So it's like a small house. Also, you build your ships from it. Very good. You can build trade ships from it, so like the market, which allows you to build trade caravans, so you can trade, just like an Age of Empires game, with other markets and the ones that your allies own. The dockyard can build trade ships, so you can do overseas trade. It's pretty good. It also researches all of your naval upgrades, and you can build docks outside of your zone of control. Any team can do that, and their loyalty will not decrease because you can't garrison units inside of them. So there you go. They also, there's more bonuses to docks. They act as a storehouse. You can store resources inside of a dock, unless that's been changed in Alpha 22, which I'm not 100% sure on. I don't think it has. You can use a dock as a storehouse, which is pretty nifty. So you get to train units, build them outside your borders, use them as a storehouse, and use them as a marketplace for sea-based trade. Docks are great. So yeah, and if you're playing Athens, they're even better because you are very good at your navy. Right, on to the next building, the barracks. You can build a barracks in the village phase, however you will not have access to all your units. I don't believe any team has access to all their units from village phase, from the barracks, but you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong there. But I'm fairly sure that's how it works. There are 3 upgrades in the barracks. You have living conditions, which increase, basically it adds a garrison regen to your units that are garrisoned inside the barracks. You can garrison a total of 10 units inside of a barracks. This is important because if your opponent attacks you, or you attack your opponent and capture their barracks, it's a good idea to garrison a few units inside of it, so you can train units inside their base and they'll find it very difficult to capture it back. So if you manage to capture a barracks prior to siege weapons becoming widely available during a game, then yeah, it's pretty nifty to do that. So yeah, first upgrade allows your units to heal up whilst garrisoned in the barracks. That applies to barracks that you capture as well, so yeah, keep that in mind as well. The second upgrade is conscription, where you will batch train units faster at the barracks. This only affects the barracks. I don't think your town centre will not be boosted by this upgrade, so yeah, just keep an eye on that. I will buy some food just to show off batch training. This is an option that you can change in your main menu. So if we go into options, you can see over here we have a batch training size option, and I have mine set to 5. That's the default one. You can set that to whatever you want. You can set that to 2. So if I now have, yeah, we will save those changes. If I have that set to 2, I will train 2 units, and you can click it multiple times to increase the size of the batch. I could set that to 10. I could set it to 100 if I wanted. I could save that at 100. I thought I could save it at 100. I can't. I can save it at 20. That's the highest batch you can train it at. So ignore what I was about to say there. But if 100 was an option, you probably could do that too. But yeah, so the conscription allows you to batch train units faster at your barracks. I don't want it set to 20 though, because that's a bit too high for me. I prefer to just leave it at 5. That's more than enough. Right. Another thing to note about batch training: if I was to train 1 hoplite, it takes 10 seconds. If I was to train 5 hoplites, it takes 37 seconds. It is faster, even without the upgrade, to batch train your units. So if you have the resources, try and batch train your units. You'll get them quicker. Very important. The third upgrade, which is actually new in this alpha, expertise in war. Mercenaries are promoted to advanced rank, but require 20% more training time. So this is something I haven't covered yet, but I may as well cover now that it's come up. As you can see, just over in the unit icon in the top left, you can see a little chevron, just like Total War Games, if you would. That indicates the rank of a unit. Now, if I go over to our champions, they do not have a rank. The reason why is because they are champions. They are automatically considered the highest rank they can be. And this also applies to the champion mercenaries. However, to our mercenary peltast, which I believe got sent off and was killed, so let's not worry about that. If we were to train these mercenary peltasts here, they would come out at a higher rank. So we'll just train one of those, and then what we'll do is we will buy some metal so we can quickly just purchase that upgrade. It won't take very long. Hopefully, I believe it should be retroactive. So these units should get upgraded to the next rank after I purchase this upgrade, but we'll see. Moving on to the next building whilst we wait for that, we have the blacksmith. Now, I did build the blacksmith. The blacksmith contains all of your unit upgrades. So you have an upgrade for close quarter infantry attack. That's your swordsman and your spearman. You have a ranged infantry attack upgrade. That's your javeliniers, your slingers, your archers. These do apply to both citizen soldiers and champions. It applies to both kinds of units. You have your close quarter cavalry, sword cavalry, lancer cavalry, attack damage. You have your range cavalry attack damage, which is your horse archers and your horse javeliniers. You have a body armor upgrade to your infantry, which increases their hack and their pierce armor. This applies to all infantry, both ranged and melee infantry. And then a cavalry armor upgrade, which gives all of your cavalry +1 hack and pierce armor. This final upgrade is a hero specific bonus. All of your heroes gain 2 hack armor and 2 pierce armor, but also cost 50 more metal. It's not a huge cost, and this is retroactive, so if you hire a hero and then get the upgrade, it will still work, which is pretty good. And just to point out that the Peltast did indeed get a extra rank from that upgrade at the barracks. Now, I will note something about units increasing in rank. This was a mechanic. I think it should still be in Alpha 22, but in Alpha 21 it was for sure. Citizen soldiers, which increase in rank from combat, have a reduced work rate. So whilst their combat stats will improve, their work rate is reduced. So units that manage to make it to rank 3, so elite citizen units, should be used for combat, because they will be worse at gathering resources from you. So keep that in mind. It's always a good idea to separate your elite units from your conscripts, your recruits, because your recruits should be sent back to the to woodcut and to mine, whereas your elites should be kept in the field to do raiding and your mainstay of fighting. Now, another thing to point out is that all of these upgrades at the barracks, these are all the ones that are available at age 2. Once you have researched them, another level becomes available at age 3. So there are 2 lines of upgrades which all boost your unit's combat capabilities. The next building is our temple. The temple is your main healing building. It will heal your units when it's in their AoE. Sorry, I'm just having a nice swig of cup of tea, since this video has been quite long, but we might as well get it out of the way, since it covers pretty much all the basics, and Athens in particular. The temple heals all your units, and when they are garrisoned inside of it, it has a garrison rate of 20, as I said earlier, it will heal them faster. Now, the temple has the ability to train healers, priests if you would. Now, they can't convert units like monks in Age of Empires, which kind of feels bad, but never mind. The healers have their own sort of AoE, which allows them to heal units in the field. And healers can gain experience, which increases their healing rate, just like normal units, as you see. Ooh, unless they removed it. It's quite possible they removed it. Interesting. Never mind. Unless it's just druids that get that. We'll have to see when I do the rest of my overviews, but I do remember in the previous alpha that healers could gain level ups. That may not be the case anymore, so I'll leave you to be skeptical about that. But anyway, there are a few upgrades that you can get at the temple. There is one that increases your healer's healing and vision range. The second one increases your healer's healing rate. So this one actually increases the amount they heal every tick, and this increases how fast those healing ticks occur. The third upgrade means that your temples heal units garrisoned inside them even faster, 50% faster. And the final upgrade means all of your organic units, so not your ships, not your siege weapons, just your living units, cavalry, infantry, archers, etc., etc., they will slowly regenerate health whilst idle. Now, you don't really want your units to be idle, but if you forget about them after a combat and they're just standing there, it will heal them over time. This is not a bad upgrade. It is a bit expensive, but late in the game when you're having to manage quite a like over 200 units sometimes in an attack, some units are bound to go idle over that attack unless you're an absolute god at micromanagement. So this is not a terrible upgrade for those situations, but can be a bit niche.
Yeah,
right, on to the next building. We have our marketplace. As I said earlier, oh, let me just find it. Should be, where did I? There it is. The marketplace. You can train traders. Traders are very interesting in 0AD. Every team gets traders, but there is the trade mechanics are very different. So in other RTSs, namely Age of Empires, that's the one I will compare it to the most because this is a mod for Age of Empires, or was originally. You traded for gold. In 0AD, if we look up here, you have the barter and trade screen. You can trade. This allows you to quickly just barter things from your marketplace if you have access to that. And if you hold shift, you can barter 500 instead. I believe, yeah, it doesn't matter on what your batch settings are. It has no relation to that at all. It is always just between 100 or 500. But you can set your percentage of trade goods. So you can trade for food if you want. I don't recommend it, but you can trade for food. You can 100% trade for metal, in which case every single trade caravan that you have will be trading for metal. You could trade for 80% metal, 20% stone. You could trade for 30% metal, 50% wood, 20% stone. You could do any of these options. And the barter value of goods is based on what is being sold in the game. That means if you see that your opponents are selling all of their food for wood, you can sell your wood for an absolute bucket loads of food. You can buy all of the food that they've sold for really cheap because wood will be at a very high price if they've been buying wood. And the same goes for the other resources. So keep in mind, you can play the market in this game, both with your allies and your enemies. To go along the train of thought of the market and trading, in the diplomacy screen you can tribute different players with different resources. You can also bribe units to share their vision for a limited time period. That's a new thing with Alpha 22. You can get the spy upgrade at your town center. I haven't played around with it, as I said in my game options video. I haven't played around with espionage very much since I've only just got back into Alpha 22. So I'm not sure how great it will be, but I have high hopes. It does sound like a pretty nifty mechanic. It's like the omniscience upgrades that you get in the Age of Empires games, where you can see all of your opponent's units. You basically get their line of sight, but it costs a lot of resources. In 0AD, it's still quite expensive, but it's certainly a lot more manageable than paying like 50,000 gold or whatever. So yeah, I'll definitely take that as an improvement. The other 4 upgrades available at your marketplace are cartography. So for Age of Empires players, you exactly know what this does. In 0AD, you get to see what your allies can see. You get shared map vision, very important in team games. Going for early cartography is a pretty standard thing to do in team games in 0AD. You can also browse their summary and check their resources and population count in the top panel. So if you were to hover over your resource, it will come up with the current stockpiles that your allies have. And the same goes for your population limit, which is pretty handy. Not gonna lie, sometimes when you're playing a team game, you just want to see how well your teammates are doing, especially if they're being attacked, or if one of your teammates is being attacked and they're too busy to ask you for resources. You can check what resource they're running low on and quickly send them some. Brilliant. It's really helpful to do things like that. So it's very nice that is another advantage of cartography. The next upgrades are trade convoys. The first upgrade in this tree of upgrades provides 25% walk speed to your caravans, which means your caravans will reach their destination faster, thus earning you profit faster, which is great. The next upgrade in this particular tree is to increase the armor of your caravans, so they're a lot harder to kill if they get picked off by cavalry and some such. You have more time to respond to someone raiding your trade line. The next upgrade is handicraft. Now there are 2 levels to this upgrade. Your traders gain more resources. So trade value is dependent on how long the trade route is. But handicraft means that they will gain even more resources. Now the final upgrade is only relevant in team games. It means that your markets gain an international bonus. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it's team games or the very niche ability of, right, I believe it is this. So it'll take me a moment to explain it. If you're playing a game with ceasefire, so you have a 20-minute ceasefire, for example, and you send your traders to the opponent's markets during ceasefire, that counts as international trade. And then you will get a 10% bonus on that. So in games with very long ceasefires, this is a very powerful upgrade for how cheap it is. But in team games, I'm not sure it counts. I'm not 100% sure there, but I don't think it counts in team games trading with allies. Again, do correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't played in a while. I am a bit rusty, even on these mechanics. But I believe it's just when you trade with nations you have ceasefire time with. So, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. The next building is the defense tower, which we have over here. The defense tower has various different upgrades, which I will go over quickly, or as quickly as I can. I know this video is getting quite long, but I will upload this as not just the overview of the Athenians, but as a general overview of the game. So if you really want to look at the core mechanics of the game, this is probably the best video to look at in the series. The standard garrison limit of a tower is 5. I'll go there. There is a variation to that, but that is civilization specific again. The upgrades are sentries, where you add 1 extra arrow to the tower, so the tower naturally shoots out 1 more arrow. Crenellations, where you shoot 40% more arrows per garrison soldier. So with 5 garrison soldiers, you shoot 200% more arrows. Combine this with sentries, and you will be shooting out absolute boatloads of arrows at whoever's invading you, which makes them pretty strong defensive buildings. The third upgrade increases the maximum range of your towers by 8 meters, which is pretty good as well. Murder holes, which is a great upgrade because it removes the defense tower's minimum range, which means it can shoot units that are attacking it in melee. So units that are trying to capture a tower are normally safe from arrow fire unless you have this upgrade. If you have this upgrade, you can shoot units trying to capture the tower. And the final upgrade is Sturdy Foundations, which increases the armor level of the tower by 2 levels. So they will gain 27 hack armor, 32 pierce armor, and 5 crush armor. The most important upgrade there is to the crush armor, because as with other RTSs, the lower the armor value, the more of a bonus you get from upgrading it. So For example, let's try and find someone who's got very bad armor values. The slinger here. A slinger has 1 hack and 1 pierce armor, which only provides 10% damage reduction. Now, if we compare that to the crush armor on the tower has 3 crush armor, which gives it 27% damage reduction. So just increasing its armor by 2 levels gives it 17% more damage reduction. Now, if we were to increase it by a further 2 levels, we'll just take a look at one of the citizen hoplites. They have 5 hack armor and 5 pierce armor, which gives 41% damage reduction. So if this was 5 crush armor, it would have 41% crush damage reduction, which is a rather significant increase to its defense, and thus its survivability. So it's a pretty good upgrade. It's the most expensive of the tower upgrades, but it's pretty powerful. So the next building we have to look at is the stone wall, the city wall, which is currently being attacked by our enemy, and they're still trying to knock it down. Yep, as you can see, it takes units a very long time to knock walls down, at least with pikemen. So yeah, good luck with that, guys. City walls, again, very vulnerable to crush damage. It's sort of the way you counter someone building walls is to build siege weapons. It makes sense. There are 2 upgrades. These are you cannot have both these upgrades. You choose one or the other. The first upgrade is rubble materials. City walls require 20% less time to build, but they lose 1 crush armor, making them easier to destroy. But they are much faster to build. Now, if you consider all the upgrades that Athens gets to its walls construction time, with Pericles as well, you could build walls at an astonishing pace, but they would be a bit weaker. The alternative is geometric masonry, where your walls have +2 crush armor levels, so they get 5 crush armor, just like your defense towers with the upgrade, but they require 10% more time to build. Now, given that the Athenians build their walls really quickly anyway, it's generally worth going for geometric masonry instead of rubble materials, because you get them built so fast regardless. The next building is your town center. Your town center trains your women primarily. Your basic set of units, so in Athens' case, you have the hoplites, the slingers, and the javelin cavalry. Now, it is important to consider what units you get from your town center, since this is the first place you can train units, and that will dictate how well you deal with an early rush, and how good you are at outputting certain rush strategies. Hoplites, spearmen. Spearmen are really good anti-rush units because they counter cavalry. So, the Athenians have perfectly good anti-rush capabilities. Slingers they're basically your mid-tier range units. They have pretty good damage and pretty good range. The only disadvantage, but can be seen as an advantage, is that they cost stone to train. Now, if you're using your stone to train slingers, you're not saving it to build up defences like towers, walls, or fortresses, and fortresses do cost 1,000 stone, which is a lot of stone. So, if you want to get your stronger defensive buildings, you may have to forego getting slingers, or as many slingers, but they are fairly standard range units. I highly recommend slingers. I don't think they're quite as egregious as they used to be. In the previous patch, in Alpha 21, slingers used to be really OP. I'm not sure if they still are, because I haven't played any multiplayer games, but I literally played some games where people would train nothing but slingers. Like, seriously, they would get to their pop cap with nothing but 200 slingers. And no melee units, no cavalry, just because slingers were so strong. I believe they were patched. in Alpha 22, so you shouldn't see any more egregious slinger spam, but we shall see when I get back into the multiplayer. But yeah, so slingers, pretty good, pretty standard range units. The cavalry skirmishers. Now, if you want to rush people, generally it's a better idea to use lancers, which are your spear cavalry, or sword cavalry if you have access to those, but I can't think of any teams off the top of my head which have access to sword cavalry from their town centre. There might be, but it's generally spear cavalry that you would use. So you wouldn't generally rush with the cavalry skirmishers. However, cavalry skirmishers are pretty good for chasing off raiding cavalry, and it's because they're ranged. They have pretty high damage. Javelin units have the highest damage of any unit in the game, more so than melee units as well. So they're also quite good for skirmishing. You can raid with cavalry skirmishers. It's not quite as punchy as using lancers. Lancers can like ride in quickly, kill a unit or two, and then ride out, circle back around your opponent's base, ride back in, kill a couple more units. They're a lot more mobile. Cavalry skirmishers, to get their damage out, they have to stop, throw some javelins, and because accuracy is something to take into account, they might not kill the units they're throwing their javelins at. But as far as it goes for chasing off raiders, javelin cavalry are pretty good. So that's your town centre. Of course, you get your town phase and your city phase upgrades at your town centre, and you also get the espionage upgrade. So that's the Athenian town centre. We then have our fortress. The fortress costs 1,000 sto. You can only build 10 of them. They do have a population cap of 10, so they do boost your population cap slightly. And they have a garrison limit of 20. I believe different nations have different requirements to build their fortresses and different population caps. So don't take that as a across-the-board thing. I can't remember off the top of my head. But for now, just consider that sort of the Greek fortress stats. They have multiple upgrades. Aside from just being where you train your siege units, they have the Will to Fight upgrade. Now this is available to all teams. It costs a heck of a lot of resources. Every single kind of resource. 1,500 food, wood, stone, and metal. However, all of your units, literally all of your units, all your land and naval, siege weapons, cavalry, infantry, everything, they all get 25% more attack. An incredibly powerful late game upgrade. Very, very powerful.
Yeah, Steve?
The next upgrade is advanced siege weapons. All your siege weapons do 25% more crush damage. Mostly important for the siege catapult, not the ballista, but you know, every bit of damage helps. You then have armor plating, where all of your siege weapons get more hack armor. Hack armor is the weakest armor on siege weapons. So sword infantry and sword cavalry are very good at taking out siege weapons. You then have metal worker. Your siege weapons cost 20% less metal, and as you can see, the bolt shooter costs 250, and the catapult doesn't require metal. So if you were going to get quite a lot of bolt shooters to provide you some sort of punchy long-range firepower, this upgrade can pay itself off, given it doesn't cost metal to get this upgrade. But generally, I would only get Metal Worker on nations that have a lot of high metal cost siege weapons. Athens is not very big on its siege weapons. As you can see, it's only got the siege catapult and the bolt shooter. Other nations will also gain access to the battering ram and other siege weapons as well. So it's not quite as useful on Athens, but it's still a nice upgrade to consider. We then have artillery instructors, where your siege weapons cost 20% less wood. Now, all siege weapons will require wood, so far as I'm aware. So, this is perhaps a more relevant upgrade. However, it's quite metal expensive, and wood is generally quite abundant. So, again, it's really something you have to consider in terms of the map and how many resources you currently have before you decide to get it. Generally, I would skip getting this, but really is up to personal preference. If you like getting a lot of siege weapons that require wood, which they will do, but if you generally do like to preference getting a lot of siege weapons, it might be an upgrade you decide to purchase. The next one is bolt accuracy. Your bolt shooter's accuracy is increased by 25%. This is one of the only accuracy upgrades in the game, so far as I'm aware. So your ballistas are more accurate. They will hit their mark much more regularly, which, if you're investing heavily into bolt shooters, this is a pretty good upgrade to get. It's effectively pseudo increasing their DPS, because the more shots they hit, the more damage they're actually dealing. So it's kind of a pseudo DPS upgrade, which is pretty nice. And because it's 25%, it is quite considerable. Okay, on to the next building. We have the Wonder. Now, I won't build the Wonder because they're very resource intensive, and I haven't been gathering quite those many resources, but you can only build one Wonder. You can garrison 30 units in the Wonder, and they heal 8 points per second. So you can use it as a bit of a healing, as a very large temple, basically. It has a couple of bonuses. Symbol of Greatness. It increases your population cap by 10 per Wonder owned. Now, this is not like a house. It doesn't provide 10 to like how many people you can have at one time. It actually increases your population cap in the game. So, we have a population limit of 250. If we were to build the Wonder, we would go up to 260. Now, the second thing is an upgrade called Glorious Expansion. Glorious Expansion increases the population limit by 40 per Wonder owned. So we would go from 250 population to 300. Now, Wonders and the Glorious Expansion upgrade are very, very expensive, and they take a very long time to build. However, they do have a very powerful effect in the game. 50 more people on the field can make a huge difference in whether you win or lose. Though I will say, most people in 0 AD currently frown upon the use of Wonders. Now, this is not because getting 50 population is very powerful. Now, some people may frown upon it like, oh, well, it wasn't part of the game settings, so you shouldn't be able to increase your population limit. As far as I'm concerned, if it's in the game, it's a mechanic, it's intended. You should be allowed to use Wonders. However, the reason people frown upon it, and I understand the reasoning and agree with it in these situations, is that the game is not the best optimized for very large population limits. So in team games in particular, it's generally frowned upon building Wonders, because you could lag the game out quite considerably. So just keep that in mind if you're playing team games. Don't build a Wonder, because people might think you're a jerk. But if you're in a 1v1 and you think you might be able to build a Wonder later on in the game, just quickly send whoever's playing a message, just like, are Wonders okay? And then if they say yes, no, then you can build one or not build one. You probably want to sort that out in the lobby before you start the game, because if you ask them, are Wonders okay in the middle of the game, they'll know you're building a Wonder, which is a lot of information to give your opponent. But there you go. The next bonus of Wonders, yeah, you get a lot of bonuses for building Wonders. Units within a range of 60 meters of the Wonder heal at 3 hit points per second. What it also does is wherever you build the Wonder, increases your borders significantly. So whereas the Theatron increases your overall border extrusion by 20%, the Wonder has a very large border extrusion around where it is built. So if I was to build, say, let's just ungarrison this spearman. If I was to build a house right here, this will take a little bit of time to build, but its borders will not increase that much around where I build this house. Whereas if I built a Wonder here, the borders would extend dramatically. I would be able to, if I built a Wonder here, I would push back the borders here. I would probably gain access to this metal deposit there, and probably this wood here, and further even. Wonders are very powerful for pushing borders. However, if you use a Wonder to push borders, then it is going to be on the front lines and thus more susceptible to attack. So keep that consideration if you do decide to build one. The next building is the gymnasium. As we saw, this is where we train Athens' champion units. You do have to build them separately to the barracks. And Athens does not get an upgrade at its barracks, which allows it to train champion units from its barracks. Certain teams can do that. With Athens, you have to build a gymnasium. However, on the plus side, you can garrison 10 units in the gymnasium, and it does heal them without the need for upgrades. It doesn't heal them very quickly, but it does heal them. What I recommend though is building temples, because they're just better for it. But this is your champion recruiting building. Not much else to say about the gymnasium. The Theatron, as we said earlier, will increase your territory influence by 20%. So you get 20% more borders. All your borders. You get more borders whilst you border. So this small amount of land I managed to take with this house by building it right on the borders would be increased by 20%. If you build a Wonder, it will increase that by 20%. So it applies for town centers as well. So it's a pretty cool building that the Athenians and some of the other, I think it's just the Athenians actually, the Athenians get access to. It's pretty cool. You can also garrison units inside of it. You can garrison 5 units, and they heal 1 health per second. So, again, not the greatest healing bonus, but it's better than nothing. Also, if you capture other Athenian players' Theatrons, even if you're not playing Athens, it will boost your borders. So rather than knocking them down, if you attack an Athens player, try to capture their Theatron, because it's a pretty good building. Quite expensive, but pretty good. Then we have our council chamber. The council chamber, where you train your heroes, as we already went over. You buy the Athenian long wall ability, and you also get the Iphicratian reform ability, which is where your triremes can train marines and mercenary archers. So you get your unique technologies, or the 2 unique technologies you can research from the council chamber, and your different heroes. So pretty important building when you hit to the end of the game, or as soon as you hit age 3, in fact, or phase 3. And then finally you have the Hellenic Wall Stoa. You can only build 2 of these. This is the building where you train your mercenaries from. You can only build 2, but they do have a population bonus of 10, so they give the same amount of population as a house. And yeah, the mercenaries are pretty good, as we saw. They have pretty damn good stats, but they are very, very metal intensive. So just keep that in mind if you are going to use them. If you did have to use the mercenaries, I would highly recommend generally getting the heavy skirmishers. Very, very good anti-champion units. The swordsmen, they're a bit hit and miss. If you're trying to fight back someone's rush, the Thracian Black Cloaks can really make a big difference. or if you're trying to make your own rush, Athens is not a team you see rush very often, but if they can get a quick H2 and then get some black cloaks onto the field, they can be pretty dangerous. So keep that in mind. Athens can rush you with black cloaks, but again, it's a bit niche since they are very expensive. But yeah, that's all the buildings done. That is Athens' roster. So I know this video has been very long, but we might as well round it off with some of the strategies you can expect Athens to do. So, the time you will see Athens most regularly played or picked in a game is when you're in a naval game. Athens is very good at playing the naval game with the faster ship construction and the ability to train units from their triremes, especially with the hero Themistocles, which will then make the ship faster and train units faster. Also makes ships a lot cheaper. Athens thus has a very, very dangerous naval game, including the long wall ability that Athens has. Gives them a little bit more variety for land-based games as well. Because of their long wall ability, and Pericles being a hero, you can also see Athens go for a very strong defense game where they build up a very powerful base, and then they will attack you with their maximum number of units. So once they hit their pop cap, or they feel they have enough champions, say maybe 100 champions, and then they sally forth from this huge city and try to conquer you. Athens is very good at playing the slow build. They can play a very slow build game, but they can be quite good at it. And they're often very, very hard to dislodge because they have such easy access to spearmen, and the mercenaries gives them a little bit of an extra oomph in regards to fighting off early attacks. So there's that too. Athens, not the team you will see do rush strategies very often, but as I said, if they are going to rush anybody, it will be with the Thracian Blackcloaks. So yeah, be wary. They can get some pretty powerful swordsmen fairly early on in the game, age 2. A lot of teams do not have access to champions at age 2, so Athens can do some funky stuff with that. However, it is very resource intensive, so if Athens does decide to go for a Thracian Blackcloak rush, then just be aware, if you can fight it off, don't give up, because Athens probably used up all of its metal doing it, which means that you have plenty of time to recuperate and retaliate, and they will not be able to fight off your retaliation if you prepare correctly. So, some of the other, I mean, as I said with Pericles earlier, some of the funkier strategies you may see Athens do is in wonder games, where they will go for Pericles and the long walls to build up a very strong wonder position and then build it faster. So it's very hard to fight Athens in a wonder game, although you won't see very many wonder games being played. They can make all the difference. As far as Athens goes in sort of a mid-game kind of sense, or in the late game, they don't get any real particular bonuses. Where they lack in their unit roster is the fact that they can only get archers from their champions. They can only get peltasts or javelineers as a mercenary, which is pretty nasty. Javelineers they are the highest damage range unit. They are short range, but they are high damage. And the fact they can only get them as mercenaries means they are going to be very metal intensive. The other place where Athens lacks is they have no lancer cavalry. They do have the sword cavalry, which is pretty handy for getting rid of siege weapons, further bolstering their sort of defensive nature, and also flanking archers, which is pretty good too. The Javelin Cavalry, they're probably most effective raiding unit, aside from the Thracian Blackcloaks. generally speaking, they're not the best for raiding with. You will see people use them, but generally horse archers or lancer cavalry are a lot better. So yeah, just keep that thought there. So overall, I would say Athens' best strength lies in its ability to play defensively, and when it is aggressive, it's generally about water control. They're very, very good at controlling the sea and thus controlling the flow of naval trade, which is particularly good in team games. Their ability to boost their allies' metal mining gathering rates means that Athens can focus very heavily on trade, whilst they give up the metal mining nodes. For example, let me just find some. There's one over here. You could allow your allies to build a storehouse in your lands and mine this metal, because they will mine it faster than you, and you can focus on trading to gain all of your metal. So if you went say 80% metal, 20% stone, or 20% wood, 20% stone, 60% metal, Athens can go very heavily on trade with its allies and allow its allies to gather up all of that metal a little bit faster. And if they need the metal to hire mercenaries or to get more champions out, they can always ask for tribute, and because you have more metal being gathered at a faster rate, your allies should be able to give you some of what they've gathered, because they won't be able to use it all quite so quickly. So I think that's everything. I am very sorry to those of you that were expecting a short video or a short overview, but it's better to be thorough and cover everything than it is to skip over a bunch of stuff, as I did in my demonstration game. It was quite hectic. So that was the Athenians overview. If you have any comments to make, or you would like me to elaborate on some of the things I've said in this video, leave a comment. I will be leaving the link to the wiki page on Athens, the 0AD wiki page on Athens, so you can take a look at it for yourself. Yeah, I think that's everything. So, in the next episode, I will be playing the next team in the list, which off the top of my head I can't remember. So we'll leave that as a surprise. It's been me, Chaff Commander Coffee. Thanks for watching. And in the next video, I will not be talking about every single building available, because most of them are the same for every single team. There are slight variations which I will have to cover, but it won't take near as long. So, consider this the end to the overall, the very biggest, longest overview for 0AD, both on its basic terms and as Athens as a more speciality overview, with some helpful tips and tricks you may have picked up. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.